the spot here. This is the spotlight. All right, here we go.
All right, here we go. I think that's it. Give me a second. Get prepared. Okay, welcome back to the All Things Aged Care live stream. As you all know, on 1st November 2025, the new rights-based regulatory model commenced, and the strengthened aged care quality standards replaced the previous standards that had run since 1st July 2019. The change is not cosmetic. There are now 7 standards, including a dedicated standard for the residential community, a statement of rights, and a graded assessment model in which the regulator audits each home and awards a grade, with an exceeding rating reserved for providers that excel in active partnerships and clinical governance. Over the next 3 years, every home is reassessed against this model, so quality has shifted from a pass-fail compliance exercise to something closer to a public-graded reputation. That is exactly the moment to put a values-led, not-for-profit CEO on the record, one who runs a small portfolio, posts sector-beating retention, and openly rejects the idea that the sector is drowning in complexity. The question for the room: is the new model raising the floor or just renaming it? To help us answer the question, our special guest for today is the CEO of Scalabrini, a leader whose career spans 5 countries and several industries. He's an executive who originally trained as a human rights lawyer in South Australia before transitioning through hotel operations, HR, and major leadership roles, including serving as CEO of MetLife Care in New Zealand and also as the National Director of Salvation Army Aged Care. Following a South Australian acquisition in December 2025, he is currently testing how to expand an organization's footprint while protecting its culture. He brings a distinct countercultural perspective to the table and never fails to have me in tears from laughter every time we speak. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise the roof for Richard de Haast.
Yes, Richard.
Very gracious, Anthony. Thank you. But you realize you set the benchmark that I've got to make you fall off your chair sometime in our time together. Yeah?
I'm going to poker face this whole stream, this whole time.
Not a chance, my friend. Not a chance.
Love it.
And we
have
Owen's
just joined us in a good way, Ian?
Yeah, for 95% of the time.
Richard,
the other 5%, I walk home thinking, I haven't lived up. I haven't provided enough value to Richard, because he sometimes, he says some things where I'm standing there just staring at him thinking, is he serious or not? So it's a little hard to have a conversation with Richard, but it's always a stimulating exercise.
100%. And so the origins of this too. I spent some time with Richard as well. We had a good CEO steak dinner out with that event last year, and also learned some new insights. But I guess let's go back to where it all started. A human rights lawyer in South Africa. So
not South Australia, Anthony. You said
South. Did I stuff that up?
You did. You did. But it's all right. South Australia still needs human rights. Let's just name that for the record.
It's a little bit further up the road. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, just a little far away. Yeah.
Please tell us more about that, because that's
that's really, we hear from a lot of different CEOs, and what did that work teach you about, I guess, the dignity, but also everything you carry into your role today? Because that's a very unique one to the show and to our sector.
Yeah. So I'll add a little bit sprinkle on that uniqueness in that I finished high school and studied to be a priest for a couple of years. And then decided to become a human rights lawyer. So my father was a hotel general manager in a country that doesn't exist. So, then called Rhodesia, now called Zimbabwe. And we lived in the hotel. So I've got the hotel business in my veins. We had a house on the roof of the hotel. And he convinced the owner of the hotel to make it a multiracial hotel in the middle of a war that was about race. And so very strong kind of social justice stuff coming out of my folks. And then decided that I didn't like the apartheid regime, and I was going to be part of the process of dismantling it. I'd been asked to join the ANC when I'd gone home to Zimbabwe to visit my parents, and said to them I wouldn't join their armed wing because I'd refused to serve in the South African Army because I was a conscientious objector. So I wasn't going to swap one military machine for another, but I would, help change things internally. And I felt that was where the human rights angle would come from. So yeah, it was an exciting time at university. I had the security police search my flat. I was arrested, and my final year of university, Mandela was released, and so I kind of had this moment of, oh, okay, well, there might not be such a great need for human rights lawyers going forward. So I'd paid my way through university because there's no kind of HECS or anything in South Africa by working in a hotel, and so I stayed in hotels.
Tell us a bit about the 4 years of considering being a priest. I mean, there's a strong influence of the church foundations in aged care. A number of our major operators are supported by those communities. They hold those values very dearly in terms of building a culture that cares for people. Tell us a little bit about that, Richard. That's not something I think most people would know.
Oh, and it's not
behind the veil, if you will.
I did point out to the department in a meeting several weeks ago that we shouldn't forget that certainly residential aged care is a social service, and that governments used to provide it. They then outsourced it to faith-based organizations largely. So it's interesting when you put that lens over things. Is I always have a wry smile when I look at profit in aged care, because parts of it, yes, other parts I'd argue is a social service, and I'm not so sure that that having excessive margin is appropriate, quite frankly. Which, as Anthony did in his intro, I'm certainly countercultural in some of my views, as you'd pick up straight away. So what do I think it is? Look, I think there's a dignity inherent in every human being, and it is our role living in community, and I mean that more broadly in society, to recognize that in the next person. I think many of the major faiths around the world have that as a central tenet of recognizing the good in the other person, or recognizing the deity, the religious being in the other person, and encouraging you to behave appropriately. And I think within the aged care context, that's a very good marker for us to always remember the person in front of you, because I often say to my own teams and to others who bother to listen to me, so thank you very much for giving me a bigger platform, but that there really only a certain number of businesses where your customer lives with you. Yeah. Hotels, cruise ships, hospitals, prisons, residential aged care. Okay. So the first three, let's not focus on prison, but the first three are all short stays: hotels, cruise ships, and hospitals. So the challenge that we all have in residential aged care, and even I'd argue over time in supported home and retirement, certainly, is that we stop seeing the individual person in front of us and we operate off muscle memory, because these people are with us for generally longer periods of time. So unlike retail, where you see somebody walk through the door, you've got to establish rapport, you've got to understand what their needs are, you've got to match those needs, and you've got to close the sale, and then rinse and repeat for the next person and the next person, the next person. We have staff in residential aged care and in retirement who have walked life's journey for 2, 3, 4, 5 years with people and stop seeing the individual in front of them and react and respond via muscle memory, which is why I think true person-centered behavior, not care, but behavior, is always a challenge in that context where your customer lives with you for extended periods of time.
Hey, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong. I think from what I've known of Scalabrini, the Rights-Based Act, it's something that everyone needs to adhere to now. But and so from what I've known of Scalabrini and from what you've just said, it sounds like you've been treating your residents with dignity and respect, and not just through muscle memory. How have you changed that muscle memory? How do you go to how do you go about that? Because there's still providers out there who I guess still have a staff, a large percentage of staff who've been in the home for a long time and still doing things their way. How do you go about I think adjusting that muscle memory?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that stop doing it as a consequence of the act.
Right. Yeah.
Because this industry, of which I'm part, so I feel like I have a little bit of a license to say this, is very good at stimulus and response. Yeah.
Yes.
So when I went into one of the previous organizations in Australia I worked in, I asked one day how many policies and procedures we had. And it was over 450. And I went, hang on a second, 450. Yeah, no. And so I said, well, our workforce is predominantly English second language. So who's going to read 450? Have you read all 450? And then I said, do a deep dive in one area. It turns out we had policy or a process or a procedure on one thing. We had 5 of them. And then I went, okay, dig a bit deeper. And every iteration from the original was because an assessor had walked into one of the facilities and said, I don't think you should do it this way. You should do it that way. And then in order to please the commission and not get dinged or pinged, he just said, oh, we'll write another procedure and here it is. And that got them through. And so we are very good at stimulus and response. So I think the first thing that all organizations should do is do away with any rhetoric that says we're doing this because the act has changed. Yeah, because the moment you do that, it's very much you are, I think, being a victim and losing control of your own destiny. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to model the behavior. You've got to, I spend 3 out of my 5 days in a week sitting at one of our sites, which is where I am today. So I do my normal business, but I'm sitting here lunchtime. I go out, I help with the lunch service. I walk around for breakfast in the morning. I walk the floors. I chat to the residents, chat to the staff, and model the behavior I expect from them. So I push wheelchairs. I pick up pieces of paper.
That's brilliant.
You do all of that sort of stuff so that people go, well, if that's the expectation, then we need to be doing that. Plus, I have these sort of conversations. So I have conversations, every new aged care organization I've walked in, I've gone, okay, so are we resident-centric, people-centric? Yes, no, we absolutely are. Fantastic. So we're going to put kettles in every rack room. Oh, my word. You thought I'd run naked down the street because everybody reacts with shock and horror. Yeah. And
you rebel.
Well, because you go, hang on, last week in their home, which is not fit for purpose, has probably got steps, probably got lots of rugs that they could trip on, a double story, whatever. They were happily making a cup of tea or coffee. The moment you walk through these doors, somehow they are less than. And I use that as a starting point to have a conversation about, generally in society, we think older people are less than. They're less able. So we don't call, we have a very strong language about older adults.
Yeah.
Because the word adult means that you then understand they're an adult because you treat them differently from a child. However, we still in this industry, and the public and the families actually, still infantilize old people. And particularly if they move into residential aged care, that somehow they are less than. And so we try and wrap them up in cotton wool. We, an example I can give you, because it's not just our staff, it's not the mindset. A couple of months ago, I was called into one of our sites where I had asked I'd moved the manager on. So I ended up working there as the site manager while we recruited for a couple of months. So I knew the families well. Was called in because they said, we need you to talk to this daughter. Now, this was a lady who came in every day to feed her mom, spend 2.5 hours with her. And she had issued an instruction to the staff not to give the mother slices, cookies at morning and afternoon tea, and not to give her dessert. And this lady came from Holland, and she loved her desserts. Man, did she love her sweet things. and the staff had tried everything. So I was the ultimate Armageddon card. So I came in, I walked towards the daughter, and she said, "Oh, hi, Richard. Good to see you. I know why they called you." And I said, "Fantastic, because that saves me 10 minutes of trying to explain this. So let's have a conversation." And she said, "Look, Mum has suffered from weight, concerns about weight and putting on excess weight throughout her life. She's now in a princess chair, and she's going to put on weight. And I'm worried about her putting on weight because she can't move, she can't mobilize. She's going to put on weight if your staff keep on feeding her." And I went, "Okay, so let me get this right. Mum is, if I remember correctly from my time here, 86, 87? And she said, "Yeah, she's 86. And I went, "Okay, so you're telling me you're going to tell an 86-year-old that they can't have a cookie with morning tea?" And I just paused. I cocked my head a little, did the silence thing. And she went, "Yeah, I see what you mean." And I went, "I know you're doing this from a place of love. I know you're doing it from a place of love. But actually, that brings joy to your mum. So why don't we do half a cookie and half a portion of dessert?" And she was happy with that. So, but I come back to my thing about we infantilize. So I think the real measure is we see the person in front of us, we see who they are on the day, and not the way they always behave most days. We see them in that moment, and we truly acknowledge and value them as a person, as an adult, and somebody that we need to meet on that playing field, which is treating them with dignity and respect.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love what you're doing there. And literally management by walking around. You'll push the wheelchair. If the CEO's doing it, there's no room for anyone not to do it.
I was at a resident relatives meeting this week, and during the meeting they had organized some snacks. So I was walking around serving people, and we had a board member there. And afterwards she said, "You really can't help yourself, can you?" And I went, "What?" And she said, "Firstly, you can't keep still. Secondly, you want to serve people food and clear their plates and do all that sort of stuff." And I went, "Yeah, but I can tell you, if I do it, then people know that that's what we all should be doing." That's what
you've got to be careful. You'll get a reputation for caring and placing dignity on people.
It was in hotels, so I mean,
I went. So we did, as Anthony said, we did the acquisition in South Australia, and where they do need human rights. But anyway, no, Anthony, still poker face. You're not responding. No, okay. The transaction only went live in January when the department and the commission transferred operations. But I attended their volunteers' Christmas lunch. And in May, there was another event, and I was down there. And I walked over to introduce somebody, myself. And they said, "Oh, we know who you are. We saw you at the Christmas lunch." I went, "Oh, that's right." They said, "Yes, you were serving the food and clearing the plates." So this is somebody who was attending an event and 5 months later could recognize who I was and knew my job and remembered that. So
and knows
really
your culture,
powerful to be
the way
doing
you
that.
do things. Yeah.
So we have a rule in our support office is if people are out in one of our locations at lunchtime, So we don't have meetings over lunch, no meetings. And they're expected to leave where they are to go and serve in. Why are you laughing, Rob? Hey?
No, I'm thinking about the
They're supposed to get off and go and help at lunchtime.
right. Gotcha.
I love that, Richard. One thing, I mean, obviously, Rob spends a lot of time helping aged care operators.
Well, I spent a lot of time at Austral out there, and about 15 years ago, so I know the sites quite well.
Yeah.
But placing care and you're trying to help operators strike a balance, Rob, between being profitable and sustainable. So it's not so much about being profitable as it is being sustainable so they can continue their good work. But how are you striking that balance? Because it's a real challenge. Rob's got the data around what's happening in the sector and the challenges with delivering a certain level of care with certain resources. But how are you kind of navigating that? That would be really interesting, Richard.
And I'll put the position afterwards too, Richard, on that. I was just going to say it, and then to that point too, I'll broaden it out to what Richard's saying is exactly what we're trying to support the sector with, as sovereign first tech, built for these problems that Richard's framed from 400 policies that his organization's expected to have and how they creep in and all of the yesteryear side. But sorry, I just wanted to add that onto you, Richard.
So, look, the reality is decades ago, it must have been in the 80s, some person wrote a Harvard Business Review that talked about the service value chain.
Yeah, right.
Very simple. Happy employees equals happy customers. Equals dollars. Yeah?
Yep.
So it is about being rigorous about the levers. So when I joined Scalabrini 4 years ago, I stopped counting after 15 years, but we had at least 15 years of losses. Yeah. After I stopped counting at 15 because it became boring, because I could see that there was stuff on the other side, but at least 15 years. We've turned that around comprehensively. We did that in 12 to 18 months by focusing on the core disciplines. Yeah.
Yes.
So 6 sites, 680 beds. People would argue that, it's small scale and you could do this, but I think you can do this at any size. So I said to my leaders, there's a budgeted occupancy. Yeah. And at that point, we were better than the industry. This will make you smile, Rob. Better than the industry by about 2%, 3%. So we were still in the high 80s. Yeah. And I said, there's a budgeted occupancy, and I now want a leads list from you every Thursday, please. I want a spreadsheet saying who's phoned, what you've done, what the follow-up is, and I would review it. Yeah. Regardless. Yeah.
Yes.
If you are 2% or more below budget, then you've got to do that twice a week. You've got to do it on a Monday and a Thursday, and there will be a sales meeting with me where I go through this and ask you in person why you haven't done this. Okay. So human motivation is quite simple. People move towards pleasure or away from pain. So it's painful to do that twice a week. It's painful enough to do it once a week, twice a week, and then have to front up to me to go, but Mrs. Jones was contacted 5 days ago. Why haven't you phoned her back? What's the obstacle here? And so we've maintained our better than industry average occupancy. But for the last 3 years, we've been at over 97% occupancy for the last 3 years.
Wow.
So this was before all the beds started getting backed up in the hospitals.
Yes.
Because because I'm an old hotelier. If the bed's empty, you lose the revenue for that night and you never get it back again. So it is about operational discipline. It's about doing roster reviews, handling that transitions, and doing it with respect and dignity. I mean, we have a 9% turnover of our staff. Now, in the industry, that tends to be in the mid-30s or 40s.
That's brilliant. Wow.
So I said to the Minister of Health, he said, what should I say to people if they, what should I do about the workforce thing? And I said, well, Minister, all you should do is every time a provider raises that, the first question you should ask is, what is your turnover? Because if everybody retained their people because they created positive working environments with great culture where people felt valued and just weren't drawing a fortnightly paycheck, their retention would improve. Yeah.
Yes.
And therefore, you'd have consistency of service, of delivery, all those good things. And some of your global industry workforce problems would go away because you wouldn't need to find and recruit all these tens of thousands of people that apparently we're going to need into the future. So, 9% turnover, which means and people like working with us. It's great. I mean, there's a lot of work, that intentionality that goes into it, but they do. And so therefore, happy staff equals happy customers, which makes me money. Well, not me money, but
which makes you sustainable. Yeah.
I attribute it to the Italian culture.
Can you scrub that? Because that quote will turn into Richard wants another Lamborghini. So just for the record, the money is not for me. It's to make us sustainable. And I drive a 15-year-old Corolla. So just
all I heard was Richard wants another Lamborghini. We'll clip that. And that'll be the thumbnail for the show.
I'm watching you, Anthony. I'm watching you.
Circle of trust, Dan.
Well, I mean, we had a webinar on profit's not a dirty word, and we just call it, surplus and the other,
Look, there's no mission without margin.
Exactly.
So we in the last 2.5 years, we've sponsored 11% of our workforce into permanent residency.
Wow.
So we've spent over $1 million doing that.
Hey, this is quite relevant to what you're saying. When you talk through this image.
Hello. Yeah. What's going on here? And apparently, Anthony's trawled the things, but we've signed a work placement arrangement with a college in Taiwan. Yeah. But the sponsoring of staff is so powerful for our employees. It is life-changing. It is life-changing, not just for them, their spouse, their children, but their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. And I've lost count of the number of staff who've walked up to me randomly and gone, "Thank you, Richard." And I've gone, "Okay, I'm not sure for what, but I'll take it." And they go, no, thank you, because you've so-and-so, you sponsored them and they've got their residency. And I don't need it, but they're my friend. They're my co-worker. And I've seen what a life-changing thing that is, how they have stability, they have security, they can sleep well at night, they can afford to send their children to tertiary education, because otherwise they'd be having to pay international student fees to educate their own children if they weren't permanent residents. All of that stuff is incredible. And so if you focus on people and not have it as a slogan or a sort of plaque on the wall or one of your values, you genuinely mean it. Genuinely mean it. And so here's my challenge to the industry. I went to the board and said, this mission to staff that we do. So we make a surplus to do that sort of stuff and change people's lives. Yeah. We also run a service line called Live Easy Social, which is effectively an excursion company for older adults. Yeah. So we partner with migrant organizations and we run all these outings. They've just 2 weeks ago spent 2 nights up in the Hunter with 16 people. In October, we're taking a group of 40 older adults on a pilgrimage to Spain and France. We're doing stuff that's seriously cool, but we can do that because we are sustainable in the rest of the business. So mission is important, but I can absolutely tell you that we are reaping the benefits of that. But my challenge, you can clip this one, Anthony. 85% of the workforce in aged care are first-generation migrants. They were born outside this country, largely, unless you're in regional Queensland, which is a unique ecosystem unto itself. But that's our workforce. You arrive in a country and you've got to rent. But firstly, you stay with family, you couch surf, you stay with friends, your cousin of a cousin of a cousin, until you've saved some money, and then you're able to find a place. But then you're in the queue. The first thing the landlord says, show me your rental history. Well, hello. I've just arrived in the country. How can I have a rental? Well, okay, thank you very much. We'll go to the next person. So I've agreed that for every staff member who wants it, I will write a letter of comfort on Scalabrini letterhead, signed personally by me in person with one of these things, that says this person is employed by us. They're valuable to us. They're important to us. They make a wonderful contribution. And more importantly, they provide a service to older adults in your community. We think that may be a fantastic tenant for you. Now, every aged care provider could do that tomorrow.
Wow, love it.
Everyone could, and I don't mind people borrowing and stealing that. But why not? Because again, you've got to recognize the person in front of you. And if you're expecting them to do the work that is involved in caring for older adults at varying levels of acuity, you've got to try and make it easy for them. We're going to set up a fund of about $150,000, and for new migrants in their first 3 years in Australia, we will provide them with the funds to put a bond and the first month's rent on their new place. Yeah.
Wow.
And yes, they will pay us back, and that'll top up the fund, and then we can give it to the next bunch of people and the next bunch of people. But you know what? Seriously, anybody could do that.
Yep.
If
Why aren't they?
What's the people in front of them?
It's approaching the problem differently. That's what I always love about Richard, and also Frank Price shared this at the ARIA conference last week, which is they've actually the board's approved him to purchase homes just around the facilities for some of those regional areas for exactly that same principle, which is 90 days rent free. They can stay in an RFBI dwelling, and then part of the whole intake. And it's been, for him, it's gotten him down from 35% of that turnover, which is where the industry is roughly at, to the lowest they've been, which I think is around 17. So that's a big stretch, but still not as high. But just another example of exactly what you're noting. So those solutions for those listening are really out there, and that's what we really want to highlight, because that's the practicalities of really addressing some of these individual challenges across the sector. From a tech vendor, though, Richard, I mean, you've highlighted some great excellence. What would you like to see more of, and those elements that can really continue to help deliver those operations in ways that you they need to be done, and we all do, but being aligned to it in the ways that you are and other groups, and like I say, we're an organization. We're always thinking about that. How can we do better? We've got 75% of that workforce is outside, and a lot of them are not as English proficiency levels for writing aren't as strong as others. So thinking about how we can use AI and use voice to text, and allow them to even speak their native language before converting it into the standard language that it needs to be stored in, and just continuing to move with those those practicalities of what our world looks like.
And that for me is the silver bullet. I mean, I remember using Dragon in 2001.
Yes.
Man, yes. It was clunky.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember that? Yes, kind of.
I had the head. I was like, train it.
Yeah. And because of my accent, it made it even more complicated. So anyway, look, I think, and this all too often, Rob, with the greatest respect to the ecosystem you work in, and I mean that not just in a token with greatest respect, which means I don't respect, but genuinely with the greatest respect, Your products are designed by white-collar workers working in an office or working from their dining room table these days. Yeah.
Well,
But they're being used by blue-collar workers. And so part of my career, I was a national training manager for a hotel company in South Africa.
Yep.
So I designed training programs for people where English was a second or third language, training programs that would allow them to move from living in a township where there were 15 people living in a 3-bedroomed room, and there was a tap that was shared by 200 people and some long drop toilets shared by a similar number of people, commuting for 45 minutes in a minibus taxi to come and work in a 5 or 6-star hotel or a 3-star hotel. But man, talk about dislocation between your two universes. Yeah. So training programs around this. So I am predisposed to go, the world is not Caucasian, the world is not middle class, and certainly the world is not English speaking. As much as we all might find that very comfortable, that's not a reality. And so the question is, what are the solutions coming from in terms of that? Because actually you would have providers that you meet with and clinical governance people. The problem they're trying to solve is to get data and keep the commission off their back. That's their problem. It's not their workforce's problem.
Yep.
You know, there is very little tech that I've seen in the sector that's actually been co-designed with the people who use it. It's co-designed with the white-collar managerial staff who sit in a head office, and it's designed for that. Yeah.
From the risk side. Yep.
I don't know. You might think that's an unfair characterization.
No, it's. I mean, it's.
That's my perspective.
It's very fair for our type of tech. I would say for Manad and Ben, the team, that's the new family. But for that operational layer, they're out doing that, researching, working alongside on the floor, but really looking at those artifacts and how we deal with. Just behind you, probably have 27 different cultures on shift right now. You know, across the site. That's a very different operating environment.
For them to vocalize. So how many languages do you speak, Anthony?
Australian. I speak American.
Just English and Vietnamese. Well, half of Vietnamese.
Owen?
Yep. Yeah. A little bit of German because of a stepmother that was Sprechen die Deutsch.
Okay. Rob?
I just would know when I'm in trouble from my Italian grandmother, and I get the swear words in Italian. But outside of that,
But so you can vocalize to different degrees in another language. Okay.
Yep.
If I was to phrase that question differently and say, what is your written proficiency in Vietnamese, German, or Italian? It would probably be quite a different. Well, there you go. So we're asking second language speakers to write stuff in systems where, firstly, they're nervous about their vocabulary anyway in a second or third language. Then we're asking them to write it. So think about the mental bandwidth that gets consumed in that act of say, write the progress notes. Well, but and now they know the commission's going to read it. They spent ages wondering, have I got the tense right? Because actually, English is not a simple language. If you weren't born speaking English, it's not a simple language. I mean, we have a word that is spelt the same, pronounced differently, 2 or 3 different ways, and have 2 or 3 different meanings. What the hell? It spells exactly the same. Live, live, it's just wow. Yeah, exactly.
I think Gallagher had a whole skit on that, the comedian.
Yeah. So then you're asking them to write in that language where people are going to scrutinize it. My word, how can we change that? How can we reduce the mental bandwidth of saying in my born language, dictate something, translating into English, pop it in. And so all I need to do
Fun.
is a 5% review of the bits. Is did it misunderstand stuff? That I think has the ability to completely transform. I was doing some staff consultations last week, and just to illustrate it for you. So these were Italian workers, yeah? And we were doing consultations about roster changes. And in two of them, it's the first time it's ever happened to me in my career, their teenage children came to the consultation meetings because their level of confidence around English, they bought their teenagers to translate for them.
Wow.
Now, you're right, Rob. Wow.
Wow.
There'll be aged care managers who'll go, no, really? That's far out. Welcome to the world of a migrant where English is not your first language. So you bring your children to a formal consultation about your work and your rosters going forward. Yeah. That two different, and these were ladies probably in their late 30s, early 40s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not fresh off the plane. Yeah. Still bought them. For a couple of others, also first time I've done this, Google Translate, and I type in English, translate to Albanian, because the staff member went, my Italian's okay, but I was born in Albania. And I said, would you like it in Albanian? Yeah, absolutely. So I was doing the consultation, talking, typing, translating, her asking questions back by typing in Albanian. So think about that. And we're asking them to use a system where it's all in English.
Well, the wow for me was thinking of how brave and vulnerable those individuals were to bring in their teenagers to their workplace to be part of that discussion, because they wanted the outcome. That's how bad they wanted it. They were willing to, I mean, wow for me to go, well, I can't imagine any of us would be in a position, but then have to go to that length to say, well, my 15-year-old is going to come along to my work meeting so I can understand, because that's vulnerability showing, but that's also part of the culture that they're comfortable with that, because they want the outcome that you're discussing. And that's exactly where we're moving. And one of our, because this is my new world too, Richard, because you're right, most of our services are all to execs, to boards, to bringing in context like Stuart Brown, to financial figures and what that looks like. But with Mana, I joined the family and been on this journey now 18 months of replatforming for a modernized AI system. And some of the voice to text trials, one of the comments that Kara made was that she had felt that for years she was carrying this load, or this fictitious sort of veil of not being up to the standards, but also the anxiety that created, and not like looking at a blank screen with a cursor blinking at you and not even knowing where to begin. Whereas now, to just speak in your native language, it converts it, and then we can use AI to even just tidy it up to a format that aligns the policies. To them, it's just, I now feel free, like the weight is off them. And that was really eye-opening for me in some of those areas. But I know that
people feel less than. They feel not worthy.
Yeah,
they feel like you talk about imposter syndrome. Boom. Yeah.
Yep.
Feels like there needs to be a forum here, Richard. I don't know if you take the initiative or a group of peers, but a forum around the fact that there are migrant-based workforce in aged care. And is the system that they're engaging with, friendly to their cultural differences? But not only that, we had Alexandra from GOC in Brisbane, which is the Greek culturally focused community aged care, and then Scalabrini, Italian by background. How do you achieve that culturally sensitive, specific workforce where those aging citizens feel where it feels like home for them because of the cultural divide?
So it's been fascinating, because when I joined Scalabrini 4 years ago, 69% of our residents were born in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's now 36%.
Yep.
And and I say this to my called peers, first gen migrants love ethno-specific racks.
Yes.
Yep.
Thereafter, it's how close can I be to my children and their children, my grandchildren, or the children saying you need to be closer to us. So on the way back from work, I can pop in and say hello to you. So it's been an adventure because there was pasta with every meal in every course. So you've got to, as your mix changes, and again with intentionality, but there was concerns about how to make that transition and would our occupancy drop because we weren't being quite as ethno specific. And as I've shared with you, occupancy has been over 97% for at least 3+ years. So it's possible is my point. But I think the thing is that we often, and earlier on we were talking about state of origin before we went live here, and the tribalism associated.
Questions.
But the tribalism associated with that, and we can see it in the World Cup at the moment as well.
Yes, we can.
But what we don't see is that actually we're all human beings, and while our community structures and norms might vary a little, it's a bit like a really interesting Venn diagram where there's a hell of a lot. It's like a daisy. There's a big center that's common with little petals that come out that are unique and bespoke. But instead, what we do is we focus on the petals being as big as the center and the differences. This world at the moment is rife with people picking sides and articulating the difference, and a lot of us and them going on. I would suggest to you that if you uncork for your workforce in aged care or in any environment, the ability to show up and be authentic, then they will. And that authentic, because there are very few cultures where older adults are not esteemed. Very few. In fact, maybe there's some culture where they put older adults out in the wild when they get sick and adios amigos. But who knows? Yeah. But it's very unlikely. So already the resting base is there. But what we do, because we're terrified of compliance, we put all these rules and regs and don't do this and don't do that and watch this and watch that, as opposed to saying just rock up and be your authentic self. Because inherently, 4 years on, we've got somebody in my support office who comes from the Indian subcontinent. Bless her. Every time I walk up and have a conversation, she stands up. And for 4 years, I've been saying, I'm not the principal. Please sit down. I'm not going to talk to you unless you're sitting down. Please don't get up. She still does it. Well, less than she used to, but she still does it. But you've got to understand that. I mean, in Africa, many Africans don't make eye contact with people who are older than them or more senior than them as a sign of respect. Now, if you're in the hotel business and your staff member who's serving you doesn't make eye contact, it introduces a little niggle that something's not quite right here. So you can imagine the conversations I've had in training programs to overcome that. Now, I say that because there isn't, again, to validate my point, there's a resting state in every culture where older people are looked up to. Some they really respected, others not so much, but they still looked up to. We just don't tap into that because we go, oh, it's very special here or special there. Think of the daisy, big core center that's common and all these little petals that come off the sides.
Great analogy on all of that together. But you're right. I mean, I think I look back at, and I've probably been to over 300 different facilities doing work, mostly ACFI back in those days with the teams, and back then we would spend a week on site. And when you're with the staff, eating with them during their lunch breaks and catching up, and you really connect with an industry at a very different level, and that's what really drove me to to this work and to this outcome, but also just the appreciation of the time, and also the opportunity to invest in their education or knowledge base. It was an industry I've never come across so many people wanting to do better, to do the right thing
Right
at all
thing.
steps.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah.
Employers just have to get out the way sometimes.
That was, but your facilities were always one of the standouts. I mean, especially Austral and the residents there, where I remember little Maria, she had a fancy for me. She would always come in to see me throughout the day, but the staff were always so gorgeous, and the meals that would be produced. I mean, I think I put on like 3 kilos the week I was there for 2 weeks at Austral.
Well, that pasta kills you every time.
I loved it. And even some of your staff, your director of care, I mean, it's going back nearly 20 years now. So she was telling me a story. She used to work as a nurse in Hong Kong, but she would basically be told by the triads and the gangs as when the shipments of the new heroin would come in, they would know by the purity of it as to what the primary health networks would have to scale up for as per their overdosing. And I'm thinking, how do you go from that role up there to, out here in Austral, but with such fascinating stories, and because they care, they know what they can do well, and they'll do it wherever in the world that they land. And I think that's
so the issue, though, Rob, is that we always look at the history in the country that we're in at the moment. So you've largely been self-employed, but if you come into the market, people don't. I mean, there is the colloquial joking about the physicist who's an Uber driver stuff, or taxi driver, which is true. But somehow, when I moved to New Zealand, I struggled, and I was in human resources at the time.
Yeah.
When I was told I didn't have a New Zealand experience, and to this day, 26 years later, I still can't define what blinking New Zealand experience is, or Australian experience when I moved across the ditch here. It's just this weird thing that somehow day zero was when people got off the plane and came to this country. Whereas there is a vast richness that we don't tap into and don't look at. So, Anthony, I'm assuming there's a reason why you've put this up, though.
Yeah, well, we are getting towards the end of the show, and I didn't want to let the show go by without giving a shout out to some of the awesome people in your team and giving you an opportunity to talk about the wins that you've had, celebrating the wins and what you're looking to achieve over the next 12 months. So I saw this post and I thought, man, that's a pretty cool role as the Chief Innovation and Chief Community Innovation Officer. Could you give a shout out to Adam Woods and tell us a bit about his role and anyone else you want to shout out in the team?
Oh, look, so I couldn't have achieved what we've achieved collectively without the collective. Yeah. It's the sum of the parts being far greater than the individuals themselves. So this week I announced a new executive position, Chief Community and Innovation Officer in the organization. So you would have heard from some of my early examples. We're very focused on mission and building communities and linkages with migrant communities, because that's our backstory. We were founded by a Catholic bishop in Italy to look after migrants. So what a wonderful gift that I've been given of having a workforce that's 84% migrant and residents who similarly equally diverse. Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time building those linkages into those migrant communities, saying, what is the answer that you want? What is it that you're looking for? Which is where Live Easy Social and the excursion company came from. Is they said, we gather in the local church hall or the community hall once a month, but it would be nice to go out together as a group. And we said, well, why don't we start an excursion company? And that's where it started from. Mm-hmm. So Adam's role is to look and build those communities and effectively those linkages, strengthen those, and also be the custodian of our mission to staff internally, because that is our community. We talk about a community. We don't refer to it as a family, because in a family, there's kind of, inherent power hierarchies in families that we avoid. So we're a community. And so he's accountable for that. That's why community comes first. Plus, I mean, we've demonstrated in the last 2 or 3 years that we think differently, and you would have had an exposure to that. Owen, this is the first time we've met. So this is, it gives you a sense of what it's like being in my world. In fact, in my previous organizations, I've been banned by my teams from driving to locations because they reckon that gives me too much time to think. And so when I was in Queensland, my team said, can you stop driving? They have little planes that will take you there, but it means less time of hours of you just thinking about things differently. Yeah. So Adam's role is to strengthen those, because one of the things that we would like to do, and the linkage into South Australia has demonstrated that we can and should go out of our way to make a greater impact than we currently do. So we have committed that in the next 60 months, so I call it my 60-month plan rather than my 5-year plan, for 2 reasons. One is I don't want to sound like a commissar from the Soviet Union with a 5-year plan. But secondly, my teams complain about how fast I move. So I reckon psychologically, if I talk about a 60-month plan, they focus on the 60 rather than the 5. And they go, oh, there's plenty of time. We will absolutely will be able to do this. So we have our 60-month plan. And the 60-month plan is, we've currently got 5 service lines. We're about to launch a 6th one. Out of those current 5 service lines, we will be in every Eastern Seaboard state in the next 48 to 60 months, with at least 3 of those. So social housing, Live Easy Social, Live Easy, which is our supported home operation, RAC operations, Scalabrini communities. I refuse to call them retirement villages, because that's a very Western Eurocentric construct. So Scalabrini communities and this new service line. So at least 3 of those. And so Adam's gonna help me as a side hustle to his role to bring that to fruition.
Well, shout out to Adam. Big job.
He is, which is why he's lost all his hair, and he's about to go to the World Cup for a month. He's probably cringing because he's very humble. But he's about to go to the World Cup for a month. And he said, "This, Richard, the timing of this holiday couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. I'm doing something I love. I'm watching a game that I love. Plus, it'll help me charge my batteries, ready to rock and roll in the new role."
Yeah, well, you raise a very good point. I thought I had to have a chuckle because I know how you think, and I love your thinking. But I also feel, as a society, we need more critical thinking. We need more stop, pausing, reflecting as part of our role. Everything's become just such almost a scroll type of thought process now that it was actually one of the pieces of advice I gave to a group of quality RNs to really think about the role, because we're reactive in healthcare. I mean, everything is a reaction to something. A doctor just drops in, a resident falls, or a staff member needs assistance. It's a very reactive environment. But I think it's more important today as society also moves into that pace, that we continue to have those reflection points. So I think you'll be doing more car driving, or maybe endorsing your teams to do that.
Nobody wants more of that. It's bad enough what we got involved in the last couple of years. So yeah.
Owen, do you want to close us up? Any final thoughts? And thanks.
We've only got 60 months to go. The clock is ticking already. I know Ant said to give shout outs to anyone else in your team. Obviously, it's a big team and there's a lot of people, so I don't know if we should go there, Richard, but suffice to say, sounds like
the reality is it isn't. We've got 1,500 staff, of which 30 are in our support office. One of the first things I did was call it a support office rather than the head office. So we actually, up until about 18 months ago, I used to clear the voicemail messages on our support office switchboard line because we don't have a receptionist. Somebody needed to do the job. Still don't have an EA.
That was you.
You know,
Ed might know someone.
It's not a big team from that perspective. But we punch above our weights, and people's discretionary effort is high, and people's desire to make a positive difference and reframe and challenge the status quo is very common in our workplace.
We love that, and we really appreciate the time that you've spent giving us insights into how you run an organisation with a focus around community, that you are a community engaging with other communities, and that you're really mindful of the migrant nature of your workforce. And I think there's some really powerful insights that we've got today. Hence saying, is there a forum and a working group like this, a Brains Trust, that is being aware as a user group, as an influencer group, around how we do this better? So if you've got lots of spare time to think about that.
Yeah.
So, look, we really thank you, and we'd love to have a follow-up on how you track on those 60 months and how that role. But it is that time of the day where we do have to give it a wrap. And we are really passionate. For those who are listening for the first time, we are building a community of purpose. We want to create an open mic environment for people who care about the issues that matter for aged care and ageing Australians. So as we always say on All Things Aged Care, all for one and one for all things aged care. Look after